Okay, so just making yourself comfortable. Rest your feet down. Try and sit a little bit forward on the chair. Begin with at least. Just be aware that that can make it a little bit sort of a strain on your back. As and when that happens, of course, you must sit back. Sorry, I've got something in my eye now. Better. But this is the aspiration to be supported through hips and buttocks sitting on the chair, your feet on the floor. So it'll be like this. I don't want to do that. I don't want to lean back. Well, I could if there was a back to the chair. If I went further back, the lower part of my back would have that support. If you still need further support, then do sit back and rest. You know, there's always a degree of conditioning that has to take place for the muscles, saying like the muscles, for instance, between your vertebrae, to tone up, so that this is a more comfortable position. You're not stuck in any position. You might try this for a couple of exercises, then sit back and maybe go forward a little bit, and so on and so forth. So, yeah. So, rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder, your arm. On the side. Upper part of the chest. Down to your belly, light on your belly. Glasses back on and the face. Now, sitting back. This particular posture I use to give you the feeling that you're able to just completely let go in your body. Completely is probably the wrong word, but with the support of the chair, things like, for instance, the feeling and the way that we allow that feeling to build of gravity, pulling you into the chair, pulling you downwards freely through your body, is a more accessible one, and you know, that's the rooting down. And we can feel perhaps that when we do that, there are changes maybe in the chest or the belly. Again, that can begin to influence your breathing and really all movement in the body. I mean, most of the internal processes, breathing, circulation, digestion, the flow of energy, are all to do with movement or connect, you know, all have movement involved. We want that movement to be as uninhibited, as unhindered as possible. So this is, if you like, one half of the equation. So good to sort of just feel that for a few moments. Now we want to come to the upright position, and we want the same sort of feeling, but we have to think about the structure just in the same way that, you know, we had the chair there. We've got the chair still underneath our hips, but not behind our back, or not so much. We want the same kind of feeling, so that can be a guide. But we also want to feel, obviously, that the upper body has some support, and that support should come from within the body. So initially, quite a good way of thinking of this is to think of your skeleton and the surrounding area as being a little bit denser, a little bit firmer, not hard, not solid, but using this natural internal structure of the body to offer the support and giving it the best chance to do that. So again, if I turn out, when I'm here, I'm sort of halfway to falling backwards. So the chair, the basic chair posture, I come forwards a little bit. Now my weight's going directly down through there, roughly about there, rather than there. There is trying to pull me back. Here is now being pulled down into this space defined by my feet and my hips. It's a square space, more or less. So we can begin to develop a sense of confidence in this, and this is something I'm going to come back to when we come to the standing as well. The skeleton provides a fairly firm support, and there's the area around that. The phrase in Tai Chi that I rather like is that outside there's the softness of cotton being a kind of strong material but quite soft, and inside the hardness of steel, because steel is quite hard because it's a metal, but in metallic terms it's apparently quite soft. Another way of thinking of it, this is my own personal image. Let me show you. If I take this water bottle, got water in it at the bottom at least, if I push my finger in here, just to, the first couple of millimeters, virtually no resistance. When I push in further, the resistance increases. Oops, I'm collapsing the bottom there. But it's never hard. So it gets denser. So maybe that's a more useful image for it. It's one that I find quite useful. It's not a traditional image, it's very much my own image. Now, what we also want to do is to be aware of that deeper area of the body. Our weight goes down, but for instance, the weight of our shoulders not only goes down, but kind of goes in, so that the whole tendency of the body is to go from sort of out here, if you like, which is how we normally would stand and sit, to a kind of funneling inwards and downwards. And then what we want to try and do is be aware of that area. So when we start to move, we actually move from that area. So for instance, when I start to turn my head, so you can start to do that now. And yes, of course, muscles are operating here. We know that's clear. We want to be aware of that. But we want to feel just a little bit of rotation in the spine at the top of our necks, the top of the spine. Not much, but almost like that feeling if you ride a bike or have ever ridden a bike. You push down on the pedals. When you push down, there's a little bit of resistance there before it actually starts to move, just for a moment. That's kind of the feeling from within, and the movement will then flow out from there. As always, if these ideas, these images aren't working for you, then just kind of shelve them. And particularly, those of you used to the movements, you may come back to that every now and then. In time, it just becomes quite natural. Hands on your shoulders. This one is perhaps a better one to think in those terms, because here we can feel chest opening and closing, and that's going to involve the rib cage and to an extent the spine and the shoulder blades, of course. So when we think about the body connecting, moving as one unit, one kind of way is a kind of vertical way almost. The hips move, shoulders follow, but again also this movement from outside to in, or to be more precise, from inside to out as we start to move. And then going forwards. So this spreads the effort of supporting our body, of moving our body, through much more of the body, taking the emphasis in this way away from just the shoulders. Hands down to your sides, and similar sort of rotation in your shoulder. So a greater spread of effort means essentially less effort for only one part of the body, less danger of tightening stiffening up, and that then impacts on the flow of the movement. Again, that internal movement, we want it to be unobstructed. Tightness, stiffness would be a significant obstruction. So these different elements, describe them separately, but they're not really separate because they're very much interdependent. Bring your hands up now, wind around. And I think, as I've said before, the three treasures, the three jewels of Tai Chi: body, mind, and movement, body, mind, and energy, momentum, back flow. And think of those as being like the three legs of a tripod. Each one is supported by and supports the other two. And then back the other way. A tent is another good example of this kind of structure where no one part of the tent is actually expected to do the single job of holding the whole structure up. But the entire structure, when everything's coming together, is a very useful and a very strong one. Rest your hand. Transferring your weight forwards and backwards. So what we have here, and again, the same is true for the standing equivalents, that as our weight starts to move, we introduce the notion of moving. Going back to the tent, if you've ever tried to carry an erected tent across the field, it's quite difficult. Often it's easier just to dismantle it and move it across piece by piece, because things start to go out of shape and out of line. And so in the same way, we want to think about how we're moving and just notice, for instance, as I go forward, am I tightening in my back or my chest? As I come back, am I pulling on my neck? Can I use my legs more, my hips more, my pelvis more to bring about the movement? And I get a bit of my hips sinking back to bring me upright. So if we're aware of that flow and we're working with that flow in mind, then when we get the kind of message, we know, oh, the flow's not there. We can then bring again an awareness of structure and of how we're moving back into this, and so on and so forth. And then turning slightly so the weight's now going more towards one leg. Well, that sounds fairly exhausting. Oh, I've got all these details to think of. If you practice it, it just becomes a kind of everyday thing. There's many things that we do to move to live our lives that are underpinned by potentially quite complex operations. And then an example I sometimes give of that is driving a car. You drive a car, you change gear. If you've learned to drive, you've probably experienced what I experienced, that when you first try and change gear, it's very complicated and you stall a lot and so on and so forth. When you get used to driving, that becomes a kind of subconscious thing, not unconscious. You know that you're doing it, but say you're coming up to a corner, you're turning a corner, you change gear. You're not really thinking, like, I've got to put my foot on the clutch or whatever. You're looking ahead. You wonder, is anybody going to cross the road? Have I got room to get round? How much and so on and so forth. So it's quite within our capability to have these various levels of awareness and various levels of intent. Some more conscious than others, more deliberate than others. And that can vary a little bit depending on exactly what you're doing. Now turn the other way. Just pay attention to your body. Where do you feel the movement, the energy flowing? Where do you feel there might be something obstructing it or maybe diverting it? And can you, so for instance, if I'm getting a sort of stiffness in my side, I might want to check, well, you know, am I going out here? And is here better? Not a big change, but one that can make a great deal of difference. And then going around. All of this is done from a point of view of resting our attention within our body, aware of the root, aware of the feeling of your weight sinking down, the ground beneath you, aware of that smooth, fairly straightforward movement from the center of your body. And those things help to provide a kind of anchor for your attention, something you come back to. And then back the other way. Stepping out, putting the whole foot down properly on the floor. And then on the other side. So this approach to Tai Chi and the movements that we make is one that we definitely cultivate, and for everybody. It's not at all unusual, for instance, if a teacher is asked a question, I do this, I've seen my teachers do it, so, you know, what about part the wild horse's mane? And what we'll do is, you know, okay, part the wild horse's mane, good question. And we sort of settle down, we do the movement, and in a sense, we find the answer within the movement, or at least we let the movement help us to find the answer. But also significantly, it's like rather than saying, oh yeah, this is part of the wild horse's mane, answering immediately, there's just that little bit of space. So you say, where's where's the elbow, or, you know, does the hand do this? What does it? That would always be my first. Okay, so can I find the answer to the question, and therefore offer it out? And it just takes a little bit of time. It gives you a bit of space, not only in your body, but we start to get that sense of spaciousness within our minds as well. For me, this is a key characteristic of the art. The hands down to your sides, turn your hands so they're palm forwards. Bird folds its wings. You go forwards, and once again, you simply rotate your arm and back. Deliberately starting with this exercise, because actually, if you watch from the side, you'll see my arm, my hand remains directly below my shoulder. I'm not trying to do that at all. And yet, the combination of my weight moving forwards and backwards and that rotation takes my hand, my fingers through quite a significant curve. So from the point of view of my arms, it's quite a minimal movement. And not only that, but going back to what we noticed earlier, you know, when I rotate in my shoulders, my chest, my upper back, and maybe other parts of the body as well, I'm sure I'm missing things, also engage. So this one movement begins to feel quite strong in arms. And you know, when you think about it, this rotational movement is the same one that we might use to open the door, to open the lid of a jar, other things, I'm sure. And then you leave your hands behind, and now they just start to swing a bit. So I go forward, I'm pulling on my arm. As I settle into my leg, my shoulders stop moving forward. There's a little bit of momentum, a little bit of energy that continues through my arm. That's just a natural response. But also, again, Try, try, try this as a just as a experiment. Put one hand on the shoulder just here. And just do it one arm for a few moments. You feel here as I go forward. There's a little bit of a what I would describe as an opening. It's like a little extension outwards, and then here that would tend to contract inward. That helps to pull the arm through, and then the opening would be at the back, and so on and so forth. So, and we begin to find little details like that. We begin to notice little details all through the body. It's not necessarily a fixed thing. It's not always what's going to happen. Mostly I find that happens. Some of them, they come and go a little bit. And you may notice things going on that I haven't. And I quite often will identify, oh, I hadn't noticed that before, that kind of thing. So one of the values of bringing our attention into our body is that we recognize more and more detail that actually enhances the movement. Now rolling a ball into your chest. So these are all things that we begin to bring into place, into our awareness at the start of a session. And these are the kind of things that I start my day off with. When I go outside to practice in the mornings, doing very simple exercises to begin with, to remind myself of all the things that I've forgotten overnight. To have them up there so that it's more likely that they're going to have an impact on my regular movements, both when I'm doing Tai Chi and just in my daily life. Bring them to the surface, because we all carry lots of habits of posture and movement for a variety of reasons that will reassert themselves. So rather than challenging those habits, no, don't do that, don't do that, that's terribly negative. More about, how about if I do this? Something a bit more positive. And then as your hands come up, vision spreads its wings. Opening, closing in chest and upper back. Weight still moving back here and forwards. Notice the order of the movement. I go back, the chest expands up, pushes my elbows back. That draws on my wrists, wrist draws on my fingers. I go forwards, chest closes, drawing the elbows in. I'm exaggerating a little bit now. Finally, the fingers. From the side here, as I start to go back, there's the opening. My elbow goes out. You can't even see my fingers now. They come out right at the end. And then it's this. Again, this is exaggerated. These movements are really very, very subtle. But if we do them quite big and quite deliberately, again, you get to know what you're looking for, where you're going to begin to focus that subtle intent to really enhance the movement. And after that flows through your arms in particular. When we make the transition into pushing wave, which we will do next time, really changes. In fact, really there's very few changes, except we bring the hand in front of the hip. We still let the elbows go out. Turn the hands and push them back. So the route that your hands take is roughly parallel to the direction that your thighs are moving in. Your arm is maintained in this shape. So from here, we bring the elbow in. You can see where that's placed in my hand. And the wave-like movement from the hips up through my back, pushes me forwards, pushes the hand out a bit, so my hand just swings up without straining on my shoulders. Again, this is an everyday movement. You know, you push a door open, you push a supermarket trolley, and you lift something out of the oven, place on the top of the stove. One more time. Same kind of principle, but this time roll your hands into a loose fist again. Your arms travel along the line of your thighs. This time with the rotation. Your elbows don't go out here. It's like the movement backward is absorbed into your arm. If your arm were a spring, it's like somebody's pushing on the spring here. You don't want your elbow to go beyond your hip, and then the spring releases there. So a little bit of change of angle in your elbow, but not much. It's in a way a movement that takes things like pushing wave and even the fisherman cast a net and just defines the movement a little bit more. And then open your fingers, turn your hands out. As you sit back, touch your hands in front of your hips. Press forwards. In side view, and I can't do it with both arms here. Coming out. Watch how my hand sort of drops down into here, almost dropping straight down. The rotation helps to bring my hand into position. I need a revolving chair, don't I? So far, all these movements have been straight forwards and backwards in the movement of the weight. Now we change to polishing the table. So that would have been a kind of vertical rotation forwards and backwards in hips and pelvis. Now we add a horizontal rotation, then the vertical rotation, and then the horizontal, and then the vertical rotation, bringing us back, hips sinking back into the chair. Change direction, polishing the table. One more time. Let the hands come down to rest. So your weight sinking down through your hips and your feet, and that gentle push up to feet, legs, hips, and the center of your body. Expanding upwards and moving your arms forward. Pressing down. So it's good to recognize that this exercise and subsequent exercises, but when you make a note of it in this one, that actually the upward movement of the arms is initiated by a downward movement through feet and hips. I don't know if you can see it, my head is going up and down slightly. My spine lengthens and contracts. Now turn your hand palm out. Slightly trickier because your arms are away from your body, but basically the same dynamic in feet, legs, hips, and center, expanding, contracting. The wild goose. So again, there are images here that may convey some kind of quality. The image of the bird in flight is a lovely one, very smooth, very graceful, one that I have nice associations with as well. But that latter, I don't really want to get distracted by that. I don't want to start thinking, oh, I remember that time when I saw the geese, because I'm all over the place. I'm no longer doing Tai Chi. But the smoothness, the energy, the feel that you might get from watching the geese is there. Alternatively, if that doesn't appeal as an image, imagine you're in water up to shoulder height and you've got a ball underneath the palm of each hand. The ball pushes your hands up and then you just get that sense of contraction through your body to draw them down. And knees forwards, hands crossed in front of your knees, sit back and then expanding again, using your feet and your hips, parting the clouds. Hands are quite close to the body here, and they're pushing up. And when they separate, around about here, you want to feel the weight of your arms dropping down through your shoulders, forwards again. Sitting back, that brings the hand out, sink into your hips and exaggerating, and then you push on. So I wouldn't expect to do that, and I went out of line. But here, I come back, most of my weight settles in my hips, I get the contraction, and it's almost like I'm going to go down again and up again. So very, very exaggerated. And again, raising your arms above your head can be very hazardous. I'm sure we've all reached up to a shelf and taken something off or put something on, and maybe just sort of like pulled a muscle somewhere or a little bit unstable. So these exercises start to train us to do, in some cases, quite tricky maneuvers without losing that basic feeling of that we get in the basic postures. And then letting your hands drop down, dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Both hands together. Try not to rush from one movement to another, or from one stage of a movement, there's an expansion and then a contraction, roughly equal in length, followed by an expansion again, roughly equal in length. and the contraction. Notice whether you're speeding up at any particular point. You could do your own count. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if anything, my arms are slightly slower. My upper body. 1, 2, 3, 4. Up. 2, 3, 4. Time, extend one foot. Again, this is a tricky movement because your head is going a long way forward. Your head is quite heavy. Imagine somebody sitting behind your chair. They grab hold of your belt or the top of your trousers and they pull you back into the chair, and this happens. And your arms follow on. Chest and belly open. The side, keep going on the same side, but just so you can see what I'm doing here. And when you come back, this is the more comfortable position. You may find, because your legs extended, that you're okay going back a little bit further. But now we need to contract in the front of our body to bring ourselves forward. If you are going a little bit further back, if you're comfortable with that, what we want to avoid is having to strain to go forwards again. So I get to here, I don't want to now have to go, oh, I've got to strain to go forward. I just let the contraction do it for me. Which foot I had forward, and I think it was this one. And then grasping the tiger's ears. There's that rotation, that rolling in the shoulders, so chest and upper back. I roll to see if you can feel the movements there. Then we'll change there. And again, I don't want to go from here forwards, because then the first thing I have to do is really strain against the pull of gravity. So this is the position, that slightly forwards position that I'm looking for. Change sides. So scooping the sea and looking at the sky. When you go forwards for the next movement, here our head is going down towards the foot. But when we make the change, the intent is for your head to go forwards and upwards a little bit. So then changing, going forward, see how my head's going in that direction, chest opened and then closes. The combination of the momentum coming from my hips, the energy coming from my hips, my legs, and the closing of the chest, the trajectory through my spine and head, all come together into the movement, grasping the tiger's ear. One more time. And come back to sitting. See if you can get a sense for that inner support for the body from the skeleton. Trying to feel that without pressure on, for instance, your shoulders. So when I talk about the skeleton supporting, just be aware that in terms of joints, and this is going to be important when we stand, say knees, hips, that kind of thing, the joints are the spaces between the bones, and they're supported by tendon, ligament, muscle, and fascia that surround the joint. And help to keep that space there. So, again, this is a feeling that I'm sorry. This is a feeling that we want to maintain as we come to standing. Obviously, a lot more tricky in standing, so it's good to give yourself a bit of time. This is what you're hoping to feel. This is the aspiration. And then once again, rubbing your hands together, tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. And on the other side. Upper part of your chest. Belly. And legs. Push your heels up, with your knees going up, just waking up the muscles of your legs. And then around in a circle. And back that way. Okay, good. So now standing. If you wish to stand. If you don't wish to stand, that's fine. Remember, you can always use the chair for support. I'm going to get mine out of the way. So I've got a little bit more movement or maneuver. So, when we were sitting back in the chair, we felt that sense of releasing, dropping back, weight sinking down. But probably, I would imagine when you first came to sit in the chair, you probably would have reached out to it, probably would have touched the chair, maybe moved it, sorted out where it was in space. So you would have applied some attention quite naturally to the structure that you were going to be using. And in the same way, we want to think about this structure. So standing with your feet hip width apart and just rocking your weight forwards and backwards. You would locate yourself in your chair when you go to sit down. What you're trying to do now is to locate yourself in your feet. Where is the right place for your weight to settle? If it's a long way back in your heels, then this is happening. Likewise, on forward in the toes. And one of the things that this exercise will help you to do is to identify that on a very, very subtle level. And remember, it's much easier to make an adjustment early on. So if you do go slightly out of line, I'll just come back a little bit. But if you're right out here, it's going to be much more difficult. There's a saying that the best way to change the course of a river is at the start of the river, the head of the river, not down at the estuary where it's in full flow. So just see if you can locate a space. And remember what we're looking for. The ground is supporting you. Your feet and your legs are supporting you. The skeleton is supporting you from within as much as possible, reducing the need for gripping, tightening, stiffening up in, say, the muscles of your back or your shoulders. And then, again, just beginning to move with that. Your hips drop back, so your pelvis tuck under, and then pushing up. We could think of Tai Chi as an exercise in problem solving. The problem is, how do we maintain an alignment that allows our body to move freely without restriction when we're actually moving? Movement is change, and all sorts of things can get in the way. And again, we bring our awareness to this. Always remembering that very focusing of awareness, that quieting of our attention is one of the great benefits of the art. Bring your hands around in front of you. And a little sequence of 3, starting with rooting down. Take your time and get to the bottom, change into the wild goose. Change into parting the clouds. Notice if at the end of each stage you have a tendency to rush, you get, oh, I'm going to do this. Just give yourself that little moment, not a race. And again, that gives you a chance to slow down, gives your attention a chance to slow down. And at the same time, we just begin to realize more about how our body is working in terms of the mechanics of the movement, and in terms of the energy flow of the movement. And our intent affects all of those aspects. Good, and then your hands drop down. That feeling, particularly again, going back to the start of the class, when we sit back in the chair, that feeling of what we might call releasing, letting go is another phrase that used, is one of the really important aspects of the quality that we call sung in Tai Chi, S-U-N-G. This is the term that is often translated as relax, which is certainly an element of it, but it's not the whole story. This is how I understand sung. Again, I'll come forward so you can see. If I hold my hand in the fist, if I squeeze really tightly, you can see, everything locks up. It's not comfortable. I can feel the tension going right up into my shoulder. If I go from this to this, look at see how my fingers. Suddenly, there's a space. I can get my finger down through that space, and yet at the same time, my hand doesn't just collapse. I've still got the structure there, but I've changed the feel of the structure. And so, when we're doing something like, say, I said an exercise in problem solving. So if you have 1 foot forwards, hip width across your feet, about the same in length, and you begin to transfer your weight. If as you do this, you notice some kind of barrier to the movement, maybe your knees a bit stiff, maybe a bit stiff in your back or whatever. We can bring our intent to that area very gently, very carefully, because it takes time to build up. Maybe it's the knee. Your intent is to release in the knee a little, but pay attention, because in doing so, if you go too far too soon, you'll go beyond the kind of capacity, if you like, of the muscle. I just release and everything could just collapse. So we gradually learn this. We apply that principle of sung, and in doing so, if it is, say, for instance, your knees, you'll probably realize that your muscles are now working much harder and things like that. So we do this in gentle stages. We release, we practice that, we condition the body to accept that release, and we release a little bit more, and so on and so forth. And so again, this engages our attention, and we have, once again, these 3 treasures: body, mind, and movement, body, mind, and energy, interacting with each other, supporting each other, enhancing each other, until eventually they just become one thing. Raising your toes and your heel. So through these processes, bring your attention into your body, aware of the mechanics, aware of the movement, we begin to get to a point where we can just direct things. And sometimes people will use a phrase like kind of, moving the energy to a particular part of the body, or something like that. In my experience, this is never just a case of the energy moving. There's always other things, those other two jewels, the mind, the mechanics, the body, are also part of that. But yes, we can definitely begin to know again, oh, my knee's a bit tight. Can I build on that? Can I work on that? But very carefully. Stepping in. Same thing on the other side. When I trained in Chinese medicine and Chinese massage, my teacher made a very important point. I thought he said that if you've got somebody and maybe they're looking for help, you're treating them, and they're there. That's their position in their life. And okay, so maybe they want to be over there, or maybe you think they could be over there. There could be this improvement, but it's not a jump, not from one to the other. It's a process, a pathway. And he said, no, our job was to help them along that path, not to pick them up and take them over there, sort of thing. And not to encourage them to jump from one to the other. Raising the toes and the heel. This can be a very frustrating process, of course. I've known people of all ages and things like that. Somebody, I've known people, maybe they've broken a leg or something like that, and maybe they're quite young, so it's not going to be that serious. But it can be very, very frustrating when you've got an injury like that. You know that you can do it. You know what you were able to do before. You're just going to have to take it in little steps and be a little bit patient about this. And injury management, for instance, is a big thing in all physical activity, I think. Stepping in. And I know for my own part, if I've picked up a pulled muscle or something like that, I always want to test it. I always want to push it a bit, which is understandable. And I think I always moderate that with this. Okay, but don't test it too much. Don't just expect to be able to do what you did yesterday, because you've got to give the body a chance, the body's healing mechanisms a chance to work. And step through. In Chinese medicine, the flow of energy is definitely seen as one of the agents of that healing process. We know from Western medicine that blood flow, for instance, is also very important. The blood takes the nutrients to that area, takes away the waste material. Change direction if you haven't done so already. So the more space there is around the injury, for instance, or the area of blockage for movement, the better. And when we go too far, if I've pulled a muscle in my leg because I was training too hard or something like that, it happens quite a lot. If I think, well, it's okay, I can do that, and every time I do that, I'm actually restricting the healing process. Now, have your right foot forward. Do a few rounds of fisherman castanet. Within the whole system, there's a great variety of movements. And after a while, you'll get to know the ones, if it's a bit stiff in your back, you'll be thinking, oh, I know an exercise for that. I know how I can move in such a way that allows this flow of blood and energy through and around that area without putting it under strain. How I can use my intent to guide that. And then just on turning, hands swing down and up a little bit. At the top of the movement, you go forwards, turn. The fingers trace out this sideways figure of 8. And shake out. And then the other foot forwards, fisherman cast the net. And then turn. So one of the ways that we direct the movement, one of the very important ways, the key way really, one way or another, is through the center of the body. We've changed the movement by turning in that area between hips and waist. And it's not a small movement, just turning, very common movement, and yet it's changed the nature of the exercise significantly. So this time, we're going to step through to going forwards. And so I'll turn my front foot out a little bit, raise the back heel, bring the foot in, plant the foot down, and then move into it. Take your time, put the toes down for a bit of extra stability before you take the forward step or backward step. Or if you're comfortable with this, you could just raise the knee. You'll see me do both. I'm not. If I get to here and I feel a bit wobbly, I'm going to put my toes down. If I'm okay, I'll raise my knee. And then go back the other way. And bring the feet parallel. Go back to your chair. So it's unrealistic, if not impossible, to think in terms of always being in that sort of calm, centered, rooted state. Lots of things get in our way in all sorts of ways, in all sorts of situations. So that process of releasing is really important because it brings us back to this state. So embrace tiger, return to mountain really takes us back to the start of the class. It shows us not just what this posture can be, but also shows us how from a position where we might feel a little bit strained, we can actually come back. And I think this is a really important aspect of the whole practice. So embrace tiger. Return to the mountain. What is it that brings you back? What combination of body, mind, and movement is working in your favor? Could it be the image of the mountain, the feeling of gravity working through your body? Could it be the sensation of movement downwards and inwards? Could it be the physical feeling in your back or in your feet? Physical sensation of release. And just one more time. And rest. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody.